Hi folks, Astronomy Live here. First, I want to warn anyone watching this video that it will be dealing with some very heavy subject material and some very ghoulish claims that I want to discuss and debunk. Also, I want to please ask everyone watching this video to not reach out, contact, or otherwise harass anyone discussed or listed in this video. They deserve to be left alone, not harassed, let alone confronted in real life, which unfortunately, as we'll see shortly, has already started happening. First, a little bit of background. On January 28, 1986, Space Shuttle Challenger had her final, fateful liftoff, ending 73 seconds after liftoff with a catastrophic failure, resulting in the loss of crew and vehicle, claiming the lives of all 7 crew members aboard. Those crew members were Commander Francis Richard Scobie, Pilot Michael John Smith, Mission Specialist 1 Ellison Shoji Onizuka, Mission Specialist 2 Judith Arlene Resnick, Mission Specialist 3 Ronald Irwin McNair, Payload Specialist 2 Gregory Bruce Jarvis, and Payload Specialist 1 Sharon Krista McAuliffe. I'm not going to go into the various reasons why the tragedy occurred. Those reasons are already very well documented elsewhere, and it's outside the scope of this video. But I will say that this video is very tough for me to make personally, in part because I witnessed this in person, watching from my parents' front lawn as a child. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. It looked unusual, but I was too young to understand. My mom quickly rushed us inside because she was concerned about the potential for toxic gases to blow our way. And it was that moment, seeing the TV across the room as we came inside, that I realized what had happened.
Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles. Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
In the years since, multiple astronauts have come forward saying that there's evidence that the astronauts were not only alive until they hit the water, but that they were actually conscious for at least part of the descent, making deliberate actions to try to troubleshoot the problems with particular switch throws and turning on air bottles to try to troubleshoot the issues that they were facing. But in reality, there was nothing they could have done. They were doomed the moment the SRBs lit and the vehicle took off.
Challenge is fast, launch is fast. It's bang, and then it's a 2-minute ride down. And you're conscious, we know that.
Astronaut Story Musgrave told me the crew survived in that white cloud. It was Challenger's fuel tank that exploded. The shuttle itself just broke apart. The crew compartment with its 7 living occupants was intact.
The initial path of the crew cabin from the vapor cloud carried it across the path of an adjacent contrail, clearly revealing its truncated form and attitude. The left wing became visible at 78.531 seconds. The main engines and crew cabin are also identifiable.
It took 2 minutes and 45 seconds for the crew cabin to hit the water. The impact speed was 207 miles an hour. A NASA statement released after the accident reads, "The forces to which the crew were exposed during orbiter breakup were probably not sufficient to cause death or serious injury." And later, NASA is unable to determine positively the cause of death of the Challenger astronauts, but has established that it is possible but not certain that the loss of consciousness did occur in the seconds following the orbiter breakup. Musgrave, who is a medical doctor and surgeon, is quite certain.
You died when you hit the water. You know that.
You think so? That's always been controversial.
I don't know, sir. There's nothing controversial about that. No. It's hard evidence. Yeah, you died when you hit the water.
At the bottom of the ocean, investigators found that some of the crew's emergency oxygen masks had been turned on. Said another astronaut, Scobie fought for any and every edge to survive. He flew that ship without wings all the way down. They were alive.
You could have lost consciousness at that altitude if it depressurized for a little while, but then, no, there's all kinds of evidence that you died when you hit the water.
You could hear it in Dr. Story Musgrave's tone of voice, couldn't you? The seriousness of this incident, and how he firmly believes not only did they survive until they hit the water, but they were conscious for part of that descent, and trying to do things to fight the situation on the way down. And he's not the only astronaut who believes that. If you want more on that, you can go read the book Riding Rockets by astronaut Mike Mullane. Unfortunately, there are conspiracy theorists who believe that the astronauts didn't die when they hit the water because they believe they didn't die at all because they were never on board. That's right. What we're here to talk about is a viral video of an individual coming to the Brevard County Commissioners meeting earlier in May of this year and presenting to them a conspiracy theory that the astronauts from Challenger are actually still very much alive and need to be investigated.
Almost all of those astronauts alive and well, many using the same exact names. As you can see here, we have Challenger astronaut Judith Resnick and also a Judith Resnick Yale law professor. Michael J. Smith, the pilot of the Challenger astronaut, and also professor at University of Wisconsin, now retired Michael J. Smith. Commander Dick Scobie, who is now president of Cows and Trees. Now, if you'll notice, they all have the exact same faces 30 some odd years later, the same exact name, and they are the same age.
You can probably now tell why I'm having trouble maintaining my usual degree of civility as we go through this video. But I will endeavor to maintain that civility despite the disgusting claims made by Justin. Let's start here. This is Judith Resnick, professor of law at the time at the University of Southern California Law School, and here she is during a 1987 Senate hearing for the nomination of Robert Bork to the U.S. Supreme Court. The first thing I want you to notice about this video is the date, 1987, less than 2 years after the Challenger accident. So aging is not an explanation for why she looks different from astronaut Judith Resnick. She is very clearly a totally different person. Conspiracy theorists like Justin focus on more recent photos of the people that they claim were the Challenger astronauts. They will not show you this video, and they will not show you photos of those people much closer to the time of the Challenger accident, because it takes away the argument that any differences in their faces are just down to aging. This particular video is excellent because it is a video from a known event in history, the Bork confirmation hearings, so there's no arguing about when it was recorded. We know exactly when it was recorded in 1987. So now that we've removed aging as a factor, let's remove my personal bias as a factor and run an image from this video through facial recognition software to see if this Judith Resnick is the same as astronaut Judith Resnick. The answer is absolutely not. They are two different people. Facial recognition correctly detects Judy Resnick on the right as the astronaut Judy Resnick, but it doesn't put a box around Judith Resnick, the law professor, on the left. It's only been trained on astronauts, and it does not recognize her because she is a different person. Now we're going to test the claim that aging will throw off the facial recognition and make it impossible to detect recent versions of their appearance if trained on younger photos of them taken closer to the Challenger accident. Here we have a photograph of the law professor Judith Resnick taken in 1990, and a high-resolution copy of this photo is available for download, which makes it an excellent choice to train the facial recognition to recognize a young Professor Judith Resnick and test that against both the astronaut Judy Resnick and against more recent photos of Professor Judith Resnick. This version of the facial recognition software was only trained on the photo of young law professor Judith Resnick, not any of the astronauts. That way, if we feed it a photo that contains astronaut Judy Resnick and we get a detection, we'll immediately see that detection, and it can't be masked by also detecting the astronaut photos of Judy Resnick. As we can see, this version of the facial recognition software detects law professor Judith Resnick just fine during the confirmation hearing video that we just watched. It also detects her just fine in other pictures, even pictures where she's much older, but it does not detect astronaut Judy Resnick. Conversely, the version of facial recognition trained on the astronauts detects astronaut Judy Resnick just fine in this photo and does not detect the law professor as the astronaut. Age alone does not explain this difference. The version trained on the young photo of law professor Judith Resnick detects the older version of her just fine in this photo. And even if we look at this picture taken just last year in 2023, it also detects the older version of Professor Judith Resnick just fine. We now return to the picture printed at the top of Justin's poster, and we can clearly see that law professor Judith Resnick is not the same person as astronaut Judith Resnick. Now let's address Justin's claim that the astronauts and their doppelgangers are the same age. Judy Resnick, the astronaut, graduated from Carnegie Mellon with her bachelor's degree in 1970. Judith Resnick, the law professor, got her bachelor's degree in 1972, and I can find no information to suggest that she was the same age as Judy Resnick, the astronaut. In fact, the dates present a real problem for the conspiracy claims, because although they don't seem to be the same age, there is extensive publications made by the various academics that we're going to be seeing in this video, Judith Resnick, the law professor, being one of them. And she has publications that go before the Challenger accident ever happened, such as this publication in November 1982. These facts all demonstrate that astronaut Judy Resnick is not the same person as professor of law Judith Resnick, who now works at Yale University. However, that didn't stop a conspiracy theorist from confronting her on the Yale University campus. And this fact, this incident, is actually cited by Justin in his video.
Miss Resnick was questioned at Yale by a journalist, and she panicked and ran from the camera. Why?
Hey, Judy? How you doing? I'm from the press. I just had a quick question, if you don't mind.
What press?
I'm from a radio station in San Bernardino. I know there's a conspiracy about the space shuttle. No, I want to be polite. Friendly, just a question. So there's a lot of rumors about you being on that space shuttle. Obviously, if you want to comment, we would really appreciate it.
This is why I think it's very important that I make this video. Because of this right here, you already have conspiracy theorists starting to confront these people in real life, falsely accusing them of being dead space shuttle astronauts. What's going to happen next? In my opinion, it's completely reasonable that she immediately removes herself when ambushed by a person falsely accusing her of being a dead astronaut, and hopefully she went to get security. We have people like Justin who show up to Brevard County Commissioner meetings and demand an investigation of people who had nothing to do with the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. And my big concern is, when this investigation fails to materialize and nothing happens to these people, whether it's Justin or some other conspiracy theorist, who's going to be the next person who tries to confront these people in real life, and what are they going to do knowing that there have already been demands for an investigation by the government and nothing happened? Are they going to try to take matters into their own hands? I think there's real reason to be concerned about something like that. Now, we've already established that Judy Resnick, the astronaut, is not the same person as Professor of Law Judith Resnick at Yale. Let's move on to the next person on Justin's board, Michael J. Smith.
Mr. Michael J. Smith was also questioned, and he said, "Yeah, we look alike, but that's not me." You can see both of these exchanges in a film called Level With Me, and you can be the judge.
Once again, Justin is referring to a video that shows another conspiracy theorist confronting one of these people, this time at their own home. We're going to see here in this clip the professor, Michael J. Smith, from the University of Wisconsin, being confronted by a conspiracy theorist suggesting that he is, in fact, the dead astronaut Michael J. Smith. Let's listen in.
Professor at university.
Retired.
Retired?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just stopped by because there's this room. Are you aware of that? There's a rumor on the internet.
It's not me.
That people are saying.
Yeah, it's not me, obviously. I mean, anybody that looks at my background, looks where I was born, it's not me. I mean, it's interesting that the Michael J. Smith that was the astronaut looks something like me when we were younger, but really not if you really look at facial recognition.
You never been a pilot, never been in the military?
Nothing like that.
Huh.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all.
And I don't respond to the emails I get. I get probably an email, maybe 2 a month.
Really?
Yeah, and I got one guy that's been really hounding me, and I turned it over to the FBI.
Really?
You know, yeah. I mean, it's bullshit.
Okay.
You know, another crazy theory.
Okay.
But that's, you know, not me.
All right.
I'm glad I wasn't him, but he was quite a guy.
Yeah.
You know, but if you look at my career, you look at my CV that's online, all the stuff I've published, all that I've done, it's not even close to what that guy was.
We're going to do exactly what Professor Michael J. Smith suggested in that clip. We're going to take a look at his background and his history of publications, and we're going to see if he is in fact the deceased astronaut or not. And we're going to start here so that we can have a baseline to perform facial recognition, because as he said, although they used to look somewhat alike perhaps, they really weren't all that close, especially if you look at what they looked like in the 1980s. This photograph from 1990 shows Professor Michael J. Smith hunched over a computer, and there's a watermark across his face, but the original photograph was available for sale for $19.99. And guess who did their research, found this photograph, and purchased it? That's right, yours truly, and I now am the proud owner of this photograph, which will remain as probably one of the strangest pieces in my collection of space-related artifacts, because of course, as we'll find out, it's not actually space-related at all, because this individual is not, in fact, the deceased astronaut, Michael J. Smith. As we did with the law professor Judith Resnick, where we used her photograph from 1990 to verify that we were able to recognize more recent photographs of her, we will use the photograph of Professor Michael J. Smith from 1990 to see if we can recognize a more recent photograph of him. In fact, let's use it on the very photograph that Justin presented on his board. Indeed, we get a match only for the Michael J. Smith on the right, the professor from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, not Michael J. Smith, the astronaut. Conversely, if we only train the facial recognition on the faces of the astronauts, we only get a hit for the photograph on the left side of the picture, the astronaut Michael J. Smith. By using the photograph of Professor Michael J. Smith from 1990, we've already ruled out aging as the reason why Michael J. Smith, the astronaut, is not producing a hit for Michael J. Smith, the professor. But wait, there's so much more. As Professor Michael J. Smith mentioned, his professional history is quite different from that of the astronaut, and it's also well documented, including this paper which he published in 1984. In other words, this paper was published over a year before the Challenger accident. But what's most damning for the conspiracy of all is that at the end of this paper, there's a short biography on the professor himself, including a photograph. Running this through the facial recognition software trained on the professor's 1990 photograph, we get a match. And as you can see, he looks nothing like the astronaut did in the 1980s. And running this picture through the facial recognition trained exclusively on the astronauts, we do not get a match for the astronaut, Michael J. Smith. I want to close out this segment of the video by pointing out that this information was publicly accessible. Anyone could have done this research, and it's unfortunate that I have to be the one to do it after someone has already harassed him in person at his own home. That is completely unacceptable. As he said in the video himself, he receives on average about 2 emails a month, and one person was harassing him so badly that he had already reported it to the FBI. That is completely unacceptable, and it's exactly what concerns me, and it's exactly why I'm making this video. Justin doesn't seem the least bit concerned about the harassment that these individuals have already received in real life. In fact, he's citing those incidents as evidence for his argument, and he's trying to go even further by demanding that the government investigate these individuals, victimizing them further. Justin has already blocked me on Twitter, but his friend, Austin Whitsitt, was at this Brevard County Commissioner meeting as well, and I don't see him calling out any of this behavior either. We're now about to address the last of the astronaut doppelganger pairs that Justin brings up in his presentation, astronaut Francis Richard Scobie and CEO Dick Scobie. But before we get started on that, I have to start by asking the question, do Justin and Whitsitt actually believe this information that they were presenting at this county commissioner meeting? Well over a week ago, as I record this video, I had this exchange with Whitsitt on Twitter. Initially, he was trying to make the argument that the reason I wasn't getting a match between the astronauts' photos and the more recent photos of their supposed doppelgangers was because of aging. As you've seen earlier in this video, we've already thoroughly addressed that question by using much older photographs of the doppelgangers, but back on May 29th, I didn't want to tip my hand too much to Whitsitt just yet, so I used Johnny Carson as an example. Because of his lengthy career, there are high-quality photographs of him both at a young age and at much older ages, and despite training the facial recognition exclusively on younger photographs of him, I'm able to still get hits on photographs of him much later in life. As for Whitsitt's demand that I go on a live stream while he tosses images at me and demands that I perform real-time facial recognition, in reality, the facial recognition neural network that I used has already been validated against the labeled faces in the wild dataset of well over 1,000 faces and achieved an accuracy north of 99%. Despite the redundancy of his request and the insulting accusation that I was being dishonest, I agreed to go on his live stream as long as he honestly answered one simple question. The question I asked him was whether any of the photos that Justin presented of these supposedly alive astronauts had been mirrored horizontally to better resemble the astronaut that they're supposed to be. Obviously, if he can't honestly answer that question, then we have a real problem with the notion that he's supposed to be the arbiter of whether my facial recognition software is working correctly or not. As I record this video on June 9th, 2024, well over a week after I asked him this question, he still hasn't answered me, and we're about to see why. Brevard County, of course, has no jurisdiction over the individuals that we've covered so far. They're not even in the same state. So Justin and Whitsitt were both kicked out of the meeting. Now, after they exited the building, Justin resumed his presentation outside, and we're going to take a look at what he said about the final individual on his board, Dick Scobie.
As I was saying, before I was rudely interrupted and my First Amendment was violated during a public comment period here in Brevard County, I was saying that Mr. Scobie is the most interesting because not only does he have the same age, same face, same name, same slanted eye in the cheek if you look very closely, same slanted eye in the cheek if you look very closely. Get this, he created a company called Cows and Trees, and the promo video has a cow blasting off strapped to a rocket, leaving a smoke trail eerily similar to that of the Challenger explosion.
Let's tackle the promo video real quick first. This is the original intro to the Cows and Trees website from the Wayback Machine. A few years later, the company's promo changed to feature a cow strapped to a rocket flying around, doing a spiral and then leaving the screen. The spiral smoke then fades into a nautilus, which is the logo for the company that they were now partnered with, called Noble. That company's logo was indeed a spiral, and they merged this with the Cows and Trees logo to make their new promo video. That's all there is to it. But now let's return to what Justin was saying about Dick Scobie's appearance. He pointed out the slanted eye and the cheek that he thinks is identical to the astronaut Dick Scobie, whose full name was actually Francis Richard Scobie. Well, let's take a closer look at that, shall we? The other side of Justin's poster actually kind of gives the game away, but you can't really see it that well in the video because the Brevard County Commissioner's banner at the bottom blocks part of the photo. But if we take a closer look, what's different about this? For comparison again, here's the photo of Dick Scobie that he presents on the back of his poster, next to Dick Scobie, the shuttle commander. Again, Justin made a special point of the asymmetry in his face, but it's mirrored from the face that we just saw on the other side of the poster. Even with it mirrored and altered by Justin, facial recognition still does not detect the astronaut as being the older Richard Scobie on the right. But make no mistake, the conspiracy theorists have indeed mirrored the photo on the right of the older Richard Scobie. Here is the original from his LinkedIn page. If you look closely, you can see his shirt button now, and you can see that it is indeed on the right side of his shirt, as it should be for a men's shirt. This correct orientation picture of Richard Scobie was also run through facial recognition and failed to detect the astronaut Dick Scobie. His other pictures were also run through facial detection and also failed to produce a match for the dead astronaut. Now, unlike Professor Michael J. Smith and unlike law professor Judith Resnick, Richard Scobie is not an academic. He's the CEO of a marketing company, so he doesn't have an academic publication history that we can reference, nor has he given testimony before the Judiciary Committee of the Senate that I know of. But his face does not match that of the deceased astronaut, and he's had a family since before the Challenger accident ever happened. Now, unlike conspiracy theorists, I'm going to respect the privacy of him and his family, but there is no doubt that they are related to him. Just like there is no doubt that the photograph of the older Richard Scobie that Justin presented on the back of his board, where he points out the asymmetry in his face as being identical, that photograph is actually horizontally mirrored to try to make him look more like the deceased astronaut.
Same slanted eye and the cheek, if you look very closely.
That brings us to the end of Justin's video. But there are 3 other Challenger doppelgangers that other conspiracy theorists frequently cite, including in the documentary that he referenced, but he chose not to show these doppelgangers at all in his presentation. As with the others, facial recognition distinguishes them as different people. In this example, we have Krista McAuliffe on the left, the teacher in space, who perished on Challenger. And on the right, we have a completely unrelated individual who has her own private life, and again, I'm going to respect her privacy, and I suggest you all do the same. Lastly, we have 2 examples of siblings. That's right, siblings. Conspiracy theorists accuse siblings of deceased astronauts of being the deceased astronauts themselves. On the left, we have Ronald McNair, and on the right, we have his brother, Carl McNair. Now, I will give Justin the benefit of a doubt that part of the reason why he chose not to include these last 2 examples who are siblings is because it's too despicable even for him to accuse the siblings of the deceased of actually being the deceased and lying about it. And you can also see that Carl McNair has very different teeth than his brother Ronald McNair. There is no doubt about that. So I'm not sure why conspiracy theorists sometimes claim that these doppelgangers all have identical teeth. That is very clearly not the case. Lastly, we have astronaut Ellison on Azuka on the left and his brother Claude on the right. And once again, facial recognition has determined that these are different people. This photograph also has a very young Ellison in the background, and it was not trained on any young photos of Ellison, but it detects him just fine despite the age difference. Now, you may have noticed that there's one member of the Challenger crew left out, Gregory Jarvis. I haven't seen a conspiracy theorist present a doppelganger for Gregory, but if they do, facial recognition is already trained on his face and recognizes him just fine, so we'll be able to put that claim to the test if it ever comes up. In conclusion, my deepest condolences are with the families of the deceased astronauts, and my deepest apologies to the ones falsely accused of being the deceased astronauts. I feel I could have done more sooner. I've been wanting to make this video for years, honestly. But Justin's video and his disgusting display at the Brevard County Commission meeting finally pushed me to going out and making this video, despite YouTube's rules against the use of facial recognition software on their platform. If they strike this video, my hope is that it will be uploaded elsewhere, because this is too important to ignore. By that, I mean to say that Justin's video went viral, with lots of conspiracy theorists promoting it, and my concern is that it could inspire additional people to harass those falsely accused of being the deceased astronauts in real life. I don't expect to change Justin's mind, or Whitsitt, or anyone else who's deep into that rabbit hole, but my hope is that this video will help prevent at least one person from falling into that rabbit hole to begin with. Thanks for watching, and until next time, clear skies.